Welcome to the Open to Hope Show in partnership with the Compassionate Friends. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here today with my friend, Allie Pedersen, and my co-host. Hi, Allie.
How are you, Heidi?
Good. So it's great to have you co-hosting today.
Yes, I'm co-hosting. I have a new job now.
Okay.
I haven't co-hosted since I have my new job, but it's good to be here. We miss Gloria, who's not here today, but you and I can handle it, I think.
Absolutely, and for those of you that have watched shows with us before, Alan has done a lot of co-hosting. He is the president of the Angels of the USA Tour. And before we start the show, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, Alan.
I'm traveling in a van, a man in a van, traveling the country.
Yeah.
And I'm just out there talking about hope, finding hope in grief and loss. I'm a bereaved parent. My daughter Ashley died in August of 2001, but I've been a singer-songwriter and a speaker my whole life. So I just kind of took grief and took what my skill set was, and I put a presentation together that I've done about 1,300 times now around the country.
Wow.
And then that's what I'm doing. So I'm out on tour this year. I'll be in about 100 cities and doing the Angels Across the USA Tour and focusing on grief organizations who are in their community trying to make a difference and trying to help.
Right.
And trying to make it really easy for them to have a program. So we have a lot of sponsors that help us, and it's a wonderful thing, and I love being on the road. I love doing this work, and I love doing the show.
I love it that you're doing it, and I love that you're doing it in Ashley's name. So for everybody out there, I know you're going to 100 cities. How do they get a hold of you if they want to book you and have you come? And please do, because it is so full of hope, and Alan does an amazing job. How do they get a hold of you?
AngelsAcrossTheUSA.com, and also they can follow us on Facebook at Angels Across the USA and find out all that information.
So AngelsAcrossTheUSA.com. So Alan, we are doing a show today which is near and dear to my heart.
Yes, it is.
You know, I would not be sitting here if I was not a bereaved sibling.
Right.
So my brother Scott died when I was 20 years old, and he was 17 years old in a car accident. And we are doing a show with two of my very favorite people who Alan and I have worked with for the last 15 years, Allie Franklin and Mitch Carmody. And they are both bereaved siblings.
And they're powerhouses.
They are big powerhouses.
If you take the sibling here and the two siblings here, the number of years of really working in the area of trying to help and bring hope to siblings on a national level, this is a powerhouse team today. So very rare that we would have this group sitting together and have an opportunity to let them share some insight in the sibling loss. So I'm looking forward to what I can learn today, and that's what I expect is to learn from what all you guys have to offer.
I agree with you. They are a powerhouse, and they're very similar in a lot of ways, and that's why I wanted to bring them together on the show. And so I'll tell you a little bit about them. Alan and I know a lot about them. So Allie Franklin, she is the president of the board of directors of the Compassionate Friends. She has spoken all over the world. She is keynoted. She does workshops and presentations on grief and loss, hope and healing, and on the unique experience of having a sibling loss, and has really raised awareness for what that is all about. Her brother, Big A, died at 1 year old, and we have a great picture of him. Allie was 4 at the time, so that was her little brother. Allie has written numerous books, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And she is just an amazing example of how you can find hope again after loss.
Absolutely.
Her mother was Darcy Sims, and is Darcy Sims, and she was also a powerhouse in the grief and loss world. And unfortunately, both her parents have died in the last several years. And so we'll talk about what that's been like and how that's also made her revisit the loss of her brother.
Yeah.
And then we will also talk with Mitch Carmody, who is one of your very dear friends as well. And Mitch had his twin sister Sandy die when she was 28 years old, and he'll talk about what it's like to lose a twin. He also lost his son, Kelly, when Kelly was only 9. And Mitch wrote a book, and what's the name of the book? Letters
to My Son.
There you go.
It's just a great brief book. He's an artist. He's a speaker. These are powerhouses, both of them, I'm saying.
Mitch is also presented and keynoted all over the country and raised awareness for sibling loss. So let's welcome them. Welcome to the show, Allie and Mitch.
Thank you, thank you.
You guys.
Proud to be here.
So, I got a really great question
Love it.
for them. Okay, so you, first of all, how old were you when you wrote your first book?
So So that's a really interesting question, Alan, because Am I Still a Sister didn't start out as a book. It started out as letters that I wrote to my brother because I was 4 when he died, and I didn't really understand that death was permanent. So I knew that I had a brother, and now he was in this other place, and people kept talking about heaven. Well, when you go other places, you can send letters. And so I was writing letters to him, and I was mailing them with little Easter seal stamps. What I didn't know is that the postman had been returning them to my mom, and she had kept them unopened.
Wow.
And so in the 5th grade, I had a particularly difficult first day of school. My dad was military, we moved a lot. And I came home and I told my mom, I said, I'm done being bereaved, I'm done being part of this family, and where are the books that I can read that will help me figure out what to do? And she said, we went and looked and there weren't any books for kids. And so my first book was published when I was 14 years old, but they're the letters that I had been writing throughout my entire grief experience from 4 until 11 to 12.
I love that story, and I've never heard it. And I've known you forever, and I've never heard it. That's a great story.
Tell us about Big A.
Yeah.
So Big A was my only sibling, and my parents were of the school that said, let's make this an exciting, amazing thing to have a sibling. And so I could not wait. I helped pick out all the things that were going to be in his room. We talked to the baby in my mom's tummy like every day for the 9 months. And then when he was born, everything looked like it was going to be great. He seemed to be wonderful. This was my baby.
I love it.
And so I would even actually, compete with my mom to say, I get to hold him, I get to feed him. And then somewhere in the first 3 months of his life, something went terribly wrong. And it turned out that he had a malignant brain tumor. And we didn't know that for much of his life. My family actually spent a lot of time going around the country trying to figure out why he wasn't growing, why he was getting so ill about really, really weird things. And so there was this sense, 4 is very young, but there was this sense that we should hold on tight to these memories and these moments because we may have a year that would be his lifetime. We didn't know it was going to be a year, but we knew that this was going to be a short time together, and so we packed in a lot of living in that year.
Wow, that's amazing.
See, our contrast today is really interesting because, when children die young, I think a lot of times the loss is marginalized in the same way with the loss of a child. And I think having them both here, because there's a contrast, because you lost Big A when Big A was so young and so like you had this rest of your life of all these plans you would have with the sibling that you didn't get to have. And then in contrast, your book came about a lot the same way.
Yeah.
But talk about how you wrote your book a little bit, and then tell us about Sandy and tell us about David.
Yes, and my book is Letters to My Son, and
Right.
I find it also intriguing that I didn't hear your story like Heidi had not, and that you started off by writing letters to your brother, and I did the same thing after Kelly died, and I was 32 when Kelly died, and so I just started writing him letters because I wanted to talk to him, and he had cancer, a brain tumor as well, and so I talked about what we did to survive, the hospital experience. We went to Mexico. We did so many things, and that I want to talk to him about. I said, Kelly, remember we did this? Remember we did that? I was carrying on a first-person conversation, and that just made my heart come back. Like, oh my God, like maybe he's still out there, that I can talk in the first person. And so I didn't share that with anybody. I just put these in an envelope, put them away, and put the date on it in the corner, and put it in my desk. And then a year later, so I realized I wrote eight letters, and I looked at them later, and I saw, oh my gosh, what a map of my emotions. Where the second letter I was saying, Kelly, I'm doing okay. I'm getting through it. It's not as hard as I thought it would be. I'm back to work, and then I saw the 7th letter, and I said, Kelly, I can't get out of bed. I just want to walk in front of a truck. I said, I miss you so much. The pain is so severe, and I thought, wow, here I thought I was doing so good, but I was still frozen. And then when I thought out, it became so real. And that's why I wrote the book.
Well, and I know that with your sister Sandy dying at 28, you said something which I think is so true, which was just interesting to me, that you felt like you didn't grieve her for many, many years because your son had died.
Yes.
And you were in that space. And then you went to a twinless twin conference, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what happened?
Yes.
And it really hit you.
Years later,
Because it was for twin
at
loss.
the time when my sister and her two boys,
Yeah.
7 and 11, were killed with her, and that was just 18 months before my son was diagnosed with cancer. So
Wow.
I had to fight for his life. So I put my sister's grief on a shelf, and I
Yeah.
said, okay, I'll get back to that later. And I thought my son was going to survive, and he didn't. And so I was grieving him.
Right.
I never went back and grieved my sister.
Right.
And sometimes when you put your heart on a shelf for a long time, it becomes your modus operandi, you know, and you get used to just living your life with your heart on the shelf, you know, and
Yeah.
that's what it was. And so I just never went back to it. And then doing the grief work that I've done for the past 15, 20 years, and your mother had suggested to the Twinless Twins, because she spoke there, and she says, I'm not even a twin. You know, and she said, you're a twin, you should go speak at
Yeah.
Twinless Twins. And so I heard of this organization, and they wanted me to come and speak. Went to speak, and I see this room filled with 125 people. You know, and none of them looked alike. This is
Wow.
twins, you know,
Yeah.
and you go, it just kind of, it's really a brain twist,
Yeah.
you know, that I'm expecting to go to Twinless Twins, never been there, what do we do? And even I was a little like, you know, I don't know how to respond to twins. I've never really talked about it.
Right.
And I put Sandy on the shelf. So when I was there, I felt the twins energy, I call it. This synergy that we get with twins, because we were all womb mates. We
Yeah.
all had a relationship for 8, 9 months within the womb, and now they prove that that relationship is valid. That relationship
Yeah.
is real. That when you're born, you've already had this relationship all set up. And so then when there was 3 couples, 3 men rather, at the Twinless Twins conference that had lost their twin at birth. And one was in his 20s, one was in his 40s, one was almost retired. And they're still coming to the conference every year. And a lot of people might think, oh my gosh, what are they doing? I mean, their child, they didn't even know it,
Yeah.
their brother, their sibling. But they said, you know, I'm always feeling like I'm missing my wallet, always feeling like I'm missing something.
Wow.
And so it was really, in fact, they have their own terminology that if you're not a twin, you're a singleton. And so the singletons just don't get it. You know,
Interesting.
and so it was great to talk to all these kids. I met a woman there that she had lost her brother Matt. We went out, we had a memorial walk, and I'm walking with her, and I'm teasing her, and she's teasing me. We had the bar. She goes, I feel like I'm with my brother Matt. And I said, I feel like with my sister Sandy.
So, Mitch, how many years after about Sandy died did you start grieving her loss? Would you say?
About 20 years.
Well, see, I think that's important for anyone
do
out
too.
there that has not grieved the loss of a sibling, because Allie knows this as well as you do, Mitch. Sometimes siblings put their grief on hold because we are taking care of our parents. We're thinking about everybody else, and sometimes we don't even think that our grief is worth, you know, grieving, because we've been told that the worst loss is the loss of a child. And so I think it's important out there for those people that haven't grieved yet. It's never too late.
No, it's never too
Right.
late. And it's such a mixture of emotions too.
Yeah.
I had lost 2 brothers before.
Okay, this is interesting.
And so I was almost a replacement child out of 7 children,
Wow.
and all the boys died, you know, except me.
Wow.
And then I had a twin sister.
Yeah.
You know, and so my poor twin sister lived in my shadow because my mom and finally got a boy in the family, and I felt,
Interesting.
oh, we got a boy, and I felt the pressure of being like to be the what my dad missed twice. It's a weird, very weird feeling. The sibling. There's so many different avenues of emotion that we don't know until we get older.
Yeah.
You know, my daughter was your age when she lost her brother too, and she went to her first conference and saw me, and she was married and had children, and she broke down, cried more than I've ever seen her cry in her life. She was grieving for her brother now she's a mom, and she said, now I get it. Now I get why you and mom were so screwed up for so long, because she got it. You know, and
I would say grief is a very patient emotion.
Yes,
That you put it on the shelf, and yet it doesn't dissipate.
No.
Time does not heal wounds. Grief work heals wounds.
Yes.
And so, as far as does it wait, it's never too late
Yeah.
to go
Never
and
too
to
late.
work on that grief burden and to say, I'm ready now. Or I'll tell you that sometimes you don't get to choose when it's the right
No, the
time.
universe knocks
Sometimes
you on the
grief
head, you know.
decides, I'm
So-
done being on the
So
shelf
Allie,
for
since
you.
you were the only surviving child, did you ever feel pressure to take care of your parents, be strong for your parents, be there for your parents?
Oh, absolutely. I was a 4-year-old being asked, how are your parents doing?
Wow.
And so the message over and over and over again was, your grief is sort of secondary or
Yes.
somehow not as important as their grief. And we really need to make sure your parents are going to be okay, is the message that you get over and over again. How are your parents? How are they doing? How are they coping? And it's like, Okay, so now I need to step up. I need to be the grown-up here and make sure that they're somehow okay. And so you do sort of feel that way. The other thing that was interesting that came up that I was just thinking as you're saying that is, I was the only surviving child.
Yes.
So there was this pressure to say, be safe in the world. Don't get hurt. You're our only one. No one ever said those words to me, but as they're wrapping me in bubble wrap before I'm allowed to play a sport, where they're saying, make sure you look both ways 4 times before you cross the street, the message that I got was, life is somehow fragile and tenuous, and you may not survive. So you need to be safe because you're all we've got. And so to walk in a world and to try to take chances and be adventurous and do new things, this weight that says it's my job to survive.
That's interesting, because I was in a head-on collision in 2004. And a kid was driving too fast on the other side, and I saw the car coming, and there was nothing I could do. And my only thought was, oh my gosh, my parents cannot lose another child.
Yes.
Wow.
That was my thought.
That's incredible.
So it's like our focus is so on our parents, and even your daughter.
Yeah.
Our focus is so on our parents and how are they, and if they're okay.
All right, I want to ask a question, and I think both of your perspective on this would be great. So if the Mitch and Allie of today could talk to the Mitch and Allie who were in their first years or early times of grief, what would you say to them?
I think what I would say is it's okay to grieve. It's okay for you to be sad. I would say it's not your fault. I spent 15 years thinking that it was my fault that my brother died. Because he came in, I was an only child before he was born. It was all me, right? And then he came in, and that happens when siblings come into the family. Now you split the attention, but then he was a sick kid. I used to say cancer came to stay at our house and it was a bad guest.
Wow.
And so there were times when I would go and I would whisper to him and I would say, I love you so much, but could you just please either get better or go back? Well, so in my mind, I said that to him and he died the next day. Now, he didn't die the next day, but in my mind, those time frames are smashed together. And so I spent years keeping it inside, feeling very guilty that my parents were going through this terrible grief because I was somehow too selfish to have a sick brother, so I had an angel brother instead. And when I finally shared that story, we were actually going through the letters that had been brought back by the postman and to put the book together. My mother said, oh my goodness, I thought I had killed him.
Wow.
I thought it was because I was a parent and it was my job to keep him safe and it was my job to somehow make the medical profession heal him and make him better. She said, I thought it was all my fault. And then she stopped and she goes, but I don't mean to say it was your fault. like she realized at that moment that she had just, validated that it was all my fault. And she said, and we had this wonderful conversation that said, no, we can't make people die with wishing their cancer would go away. We can't make people live because we want them to very, very much. And so I would go back in time and say, it's not your fault. And your grief is important and valid too. And it deserves attention, not only from other people, but from yourself. Give yourself permission to grieve.
How would you answer that, Mitch?
I would guess is that keeping the narrative of their life alive. And express and talk about them, keep their legacy alive and do things. And I wish I would have done more. When my sister died, I took her purse that was in the car accident with her, put the gown, pregnant dress that she wore with her. She had a set of twins as well, And so I put that dress in the purse, put her Bible tracts, everything that a woman has in her purse. And I put it away for 15 years. And when my niece turned 16, I gave it to her and said, this is your mom's purse. She could smell her perfume. She could see her Bible tracts, her grocery store list, her bubble gum, what gum she chewed. She got to really, and she told me when she got married, she said, thank you, Mitch, so much for keeping my mom present in my life because I feel like I know her. I feel I can tell my children about my mother. And she died she was 18 months old.
That's amazing. I love that story. How did you both find hope after loss? How did you not only survive but thrive? Because you both thrived. You haven't just survived.
For me, it was about not waiting for other people to bring up his name. We were a military family. We moved every year of my childhood. And so as we're unpacking things, my parents would pull out the pictures of my brother, to the point where, honestly, it was a little shrine for a while, but we got through that. But what we would notice is that we wanted to talk about him, but other people were uncomfortable. And angel anniversaries would come up, and no one would call, and no one would say anything, and no one would do anything. And so at some point our family really said, you know, we have to take control of this narrative. Let's not wait for other people to say his name. Let's not wait for other people to talk about who he was. Let's do things in his name and in his honor so that we are bringing him up to people who've never known him. And let's share his legacy. We started by buying lunch boxes around school time for kids who didn't have the money to have a lunchbox, and we would put little notes in it saying, here's a gift from Big A. We didn't say from Big A who died. We just said, here's a little gift for you from Big A.
That's really cool.
And so instead, what was really cool is it changed the narrative for us. Instead of being the family who was avoiding the stores during September, August, July, June, they start back to school really early, right? We would avoid the stores because it was too hard to be by the back to school stuff. Now all of a sudden we're scouring the town trying to find just the right lunch boxes to donate in his name. And so for us, what helped us find hope is to keep his story and his legacy alive, and to tell the story of not his death. Absolutely, the death is a part of it, but to tell the story of his life and the courage that it took to spend your entire life fighting cancer and to not give up. That little kid was smiling a big giant smile at the last breath of his life. And so if he could have that courage, somehow telling his story could help us find a way forward.
That's amazing.
What about you, Mitch?
I would say
Hope's a big word. Hope's always, you know.
Yeah, hope is, you know, and I tell people early on in grief, you know, to find, don't worry about it for a few months or a year, whatever it takes for you. Hope is so elusive in that, because you're so frozen, you're so numb that, how can I have hope? Well, then don't talk about it. I don't say you're going to have hope, but it can't help itself. Hope just comes in because it needs to. And when it does happen, you start to, you find out what creates the hope. You do something and you feel better, and that creates the hope. So what does? Mine was serving others. I started giving blood, and that's the best I felt. That created hope in me, because I'm giving blood to someone else. Maybe I'm saving some other child somewhere. That gave me hope that someone else won't experience what I experienced.
So how about, as we start winding down here, somebody's watching the program today and they're grieving their sibling, and maybe they don't feel hope. What would you say? Just each take a quick little turn here and say, what would you say to them that maybe they could find hope in?
Absolutely. I would say the first piece is when I find hope in the moments, and I'll tell you, Heidi, you mentioned it, my parents, my father died this year and my mom died 4 years ago, and my grief was ripped open. The scab was ripped right open because as an only surviving child, my brother would have been there to help me with funerals and with estate planning and all of the things that happen when adult parents die. And so all of a sudden I was kind of thrown back into that. And what brings me hope is when I remember that they lived. When I remember first that they lived, and I tell a story when I'm feeling that moment, right? I write a letter, again, that says,
early skills that you learn.
Exactly. Yes. How do I keep my relationship with my brother, and now my parents, in the present tense? I don't talk about them as being not there. My book, Am I Still a Sister, was because I had to ask the question, how many brothers and sisters do you have? How do I answer that question? And so when I say I am still a sister, and I have a brother, and I have a mother, and I have a father, and so when I remember and pull up those memories of when we were together, and then I say, all right, how do I take that and do something tangible with it? That's how I have.
Yes, I have to echo what you said, because I was going to say the same thing, is keeping them present. I used to say I had a son, his name was Kelly. Now I say I have a son, his name is Kelly. And if you haven't actually vocalized that as a griever, you really feel the power that it contains when you actually do that. And so I also believe in signs. And so when you can get a sign from your loved one, so ask them. That is really putting you into the present moment, because you're dialoguing with them. Please send me a sign. And it doesn't come on our time. But eventually it can come, and it's just maintaining that present relationship. We both concur on that.
We could talk all day with these two.
I know, I love it.
Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you so much. As Alan said, I think we're going to close the show. I love how you keep everybody's memory alive.
Absolutely.
Your sister Sandy, your brother Big A. I mean, I think that is so key. And I think part of being a sibling, Alan, is part of our job is to keep our siblings' memories alive and to tell everybody who they were, because we know stories about them nobody else knows. And I share with my kids about Scott all the time. We know funny things, right? We know things that nobody, our parents don't want to know.
That's another whole show.
That's a whole nother show. But yes, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for co-hosting, Alan.
Enjoyed it. Thanks
Yes.
both to our guests.
And thanks to our guests. And I guess I would say, if you've lost hope, please lean on mine and Alan's, Allie's, and Mitch's until you find your own. Thank you, and please visit opentohope.com to see shows like this and to not only survive, but to thrive, just as our guests have today. Thank you.
In a crowd somewhere, a raindrop on my window, a teddy bear, and I remember you. I remember your smile, your face, the way you move, and I can see you dancing. I can hear you laugh. Anything and everything can take me back. It's who I am. It's what I love to do. Yeah, I remember you. Well, I've got pictures and videos, and I see them all the time. But my favorite memories, well, they're right here in my mind. 'Cause I can see you dancing. I can hear you laugh. Anything and everything can take me back. It's who I am. It's what I love to do. I remember